Good afternoon. I'm Francis Levy, and I'm co-director of the Philoctetes Center, and Ed Nersessian is the other co-director standing in the back. And welcome to this preview showing of Chuck Close. You're asking, well, Chuck Close, and then be Chuck Close on film. I want to thank the Film Forum for allowing us to show and preview this film. And now I'd like to introduce Matthew von Unwerth. Matthew von Unwerth is the media coordinator of the Philoctetes Center. He's the author of a wonderful book called Freud's Requiem. And he is in training at the IPTAR Psychoanalytic Institute. I'm not saying that correctly. Yeah. And Matthew will introduce our distinguished guests and act as a discussant also. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Just briefly to introduce our participants. First with Vincent Katz, who we've worked with before. He brought us his wonderful film called Squatting the Palace, which was a work about Kiki Smith, which really got us going with this ongoing film series about the works of artists. We're also going to do a film with the production company that fostered that work on Ellsworth Kelly in January or February, and Vincent came and talked with us with Kiki Smith, and we had a wonderful conversation, and he was a natural to have back because that film, much like this film, is really a hard look at an artist's process and all that sort of goes on in it. And it's a little background about him. He's a poet, translator, art critic, editor, and curator. He's done documentary films on Alex Katz and Kiki Smith, and also on the art of Rudy Burkhart, as well as the 9 books of poetry he wrote, including Kabbalah Zealots and Understanding Objects and Rapid Departures. He won the 2005 Natural Translation Award, given by the American Literary Translators Association for his book of translations from Latin, The Complete Elegies of Sextus Propertius, and was awarded Rome Prize Fellowship in Literature at the American Academy in Rome for 2001-2002. Our other guest, of course, is Chuck Close, who is the subject of this afternoon. And I'm only going to, I think he's probably been introduced many, many times. I will only introduce him as the film's promotional materials do, because we're going to get to see a lot about him over the next several hours. Since 1969, when his work was first shown at the Vicar Gallery in Soho, Close has been best known as the reinventor of portraiture. As we hear this articulate and affable man discuss his personal journey, and as we watch him create a self-portrait from Polaroid to final stroke after 82 days, and as we hear numerous interviews with his subjects, friends, artists, family who discuss their own work and life in relation to his, we come to understand how far Close has transcended categories like realism, process, and abstraction, and what a profound influence he has had on his generation of art. The film I think you're about to see is pretty unusual in this genre, because in addition to being a film about Mr. Close and his work, it's also about his circle of friends and their work. And actually there are, throughout the film, almost mini documentaries that take you into other people's studios. These are all people that are, in one way or another, contemporaries or antecedents of Mr. Close. And I think that's an important choice for the director of the film, because that's also the subject of the artist's work. I guess I'd like to start there. The film, I think, as you'll see, in the film, Mr. Close is asked how he picks the colors for the squares and the circles that he paints, and his response is that it's like musical chords, that there are certain combinations of colors that evoke senses, like music. Senses isn't the right word. And I guess in watching the film, I had a similar reaction in the way that the film itself progresses, that its theme, its subject, and its method were all very much in consonance. And that seems also to be a theme, if you will, in Mr. Close's work and life. So maybe if we could start there. If you have any reactions to that idea.
Well, the reason that I use the analogy of music is that people wonder how I can sit at arm's length from the painting and make these decisions and put 4 or 5 or 6 colors into a square and know what it's going to read like from a distance. And the paintings take 4 months as it is. If I went back to see how it's going, after every stroke or two, I'd never get the things finished. So since people had a hard time understanding how it's possible to know so close to what you're doing, what it's going to read like at a distance, the analogy I used was a composer going into a room by himself or herself with no musical instruments and no musicians, and just from years of experience, scoring the piece, assigning this note to the oboe and that note to the bassoon and that note to the French horn or whatever, from years of experience would know what that resultant sound would be when all those musical instruments played their note at the same time. And that what I'm doing is doing something very similar to a musical chord, and it's in essence a kind of color chord. I just know from years of experience that if I put this color and that color and this color and sneak up on what I want, I can find what I want, which is very different than from supposing what it is or conceptualizing what it is and then just executing it. It's all found in place. It's found in context in the rectangle. So sometimes I use analogies in other fields so that that people will be able to understand the nature. Most people don't understand how art happens. It just sort of looks like it blew onto the canvas somehow, and it's really just a series of decisions and putting yourself in a position to make decisions.
That was one of your starting principles, was it not? To make art a process, to emphasize the process and how art is made as much as the resulting image.
Yeah, I never wanted to deny the magic qualities of painting, which I consider to be the most magical of the mediums. I mean, a sculpture, much as I love sculpture, it occupies real space like you or I, and if I could roll around you or roll around a piece of sculpture, I'll understand it by doing that. But a painting is this magic window, this rectangle on the wall with just colored dirt smeared on a flat surface, and it's the most transcendent because it transcends its physical reality and makes space where there is no space. It allows you to make associations with life experiences you've had. A painting can make you cry, and the thing is still just colored dirt on a flat surface. So I've always been interested in the artificial. The reason I never liked the word realist was I was always as interested in artificiality as I was in reality, and it's ripping back and forth between the artificial, that is the distribution of colored dirt on a flat surface, and then it warps into an image, and then it flattens back out and becomes paint again. And it's that ripping back and forth which really interests me.
Well, I was interested in this question about when you make art, when someone makes art, presumably there is this desire to have it seen by a public, and then when that happens, one knows that, or hopes for, the possibility that people will comment on that work. And so I'm interested in this phenomenon of being observed. As an artist, you're making your work, and you get observed and commented on by critics, but increasingly, I think, as in your case, you also get observed more directly while you're working, or in your studio, or interviewed in your studio, or in this case actually filmed while working. And I just was wondering how you
seems like I've been involved in Chuck-O-Rama for a very long time, and even I'm tired of me. I can't imagine how tired everybody else is. But it is true, and it's a nauseating amount of stuff out there on me. But this is really what it was all about. I wanted to get stuff out in front of people, And it's a narcissistic kind of business. I feel like I have something to say. I'm narcissistic enough to think other people might want to actually look at it. And I really mean this sincerely. I make art for myself, but I really do. It is a form of communication, and I'm interested in putting it out. I would not be that artist on a desert island poking his hand with a stick and getting blood and drawing on the back of a leaf. This is not me. If there's no audience there, I'm not making art. You know? I'll wait till someone shows up and then I'll make some art. I'm not driven to make stuff just because I need to. And I think no one less than Marcel Duchamp said that the artist had only 50% of the responsibility, and that's to get the work out. But the work is not complete until it's returned by the viewer. And I really do believe that it is this cycle that interests me.
But how do you work with what comes back? Does it ever surprise you? Does it bother you? And if so, how do you mediate that? How do you deal with what you're getting back?
Well, one of the really surprising things, I used to be 6'3". Well, I still am 6'3", but I'm what, 3'4" or something down here. And I used to sort of tower over most people, and I think I was and I'm sort of loud and aggressive and whatever. So I think people didn't approach me. I never got any comments from anybody. And then I went into a wheelchair. You know the thing where Barbara Walters asked people if they were a tree, what tree would they be? The dumbest of all journalistic questions that you can ask. I wanted so much to be on her show so she could ask me, and then I would say, when she asked what kind of tree, I'd say I'm a stump, because it really cut me down to size. And the benefit of that, and there always is a benefit to no matter how screwed it up it is, there's always something that you get out of almost anything that happens to you, and it made me much more approachable, and people felt like they could come up and talk to me. And people are stopping me all the time and telling me about works of mine that mattered to them, and relationships they've had to the work and what it meant and when they first saw it. One of the things that's scary is someone comes up to me, and I think they're older than I am, and they say, I remember when my mom took me to the museum when I was this high, but I have been around a long time. But I do think it's one of the really strange benefits of being in a wheelchair is that it made me so much more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question about the subject of your art, which is very frequently your friends and family, and in particular your friends who are artists. In talking to people, or in listening to people like Philip Glass, the whole group of you, it seemed, were committed to the process of making art as a way of life from an early age, and that almost seems like, I wonder if I'm sure you've thought about this many times over your...
Well, the late 60s, when I got out of graduate school at Yale in 64, and my classmates were Richard Serra, Nancy Graves, Bryce Martin, Bob and Sylvia Mangold, Janet Fish, Roxanne Downs, Newton Harrison, Jennifer Bartlett. So, and we all moved to New York together, and we helped each other. I helped Richard Serra build all his early lead prop pieces, and so when I was looking for anonymous people to paint, all the people were helping Richard make his sculpture and moving furniture so that Phil Glass could do a concert in someone's studio, someone's loft, or Von Rainer or Trish Brown could dance there or whatever. We just all were anonymous people, regular folks, and Warhol owned superstars. I mean, the other person besides Warhol who was a real hero to me, amongst others, is your father, who I think was one of the Alex Katz, who was one of that he and Andy and Philip Pearlstein were almost alone in trying to make a forward-looking, truly modernist kind of figurative painting in the 60s and early 60s, when nothing could have been dumber than doing that. I mean, it was really dumb. I mean, painting was dead. Figurative painting was even deader. And a portrait was the most moribund and absolutely over kind of thing. So they were real heroes. They kicked open the door for me, and I've always felt a real kinship for them. I forget what the question was.
Well, I guess my question is really about, I mean, you're not a portraitist like Lucian Freud, who will paint a model. His models are sometimes related to his life, but your subject matter is very much the people of your life, and the people of your life are very much themselves, by and large,
it's a combination.
the process of art. And so it almost seems like they are, the subject of your work is the work of making art through. The
subject of the work is the portrait, but it's also, I hope they're paintings, and I hope they make sense as paintings first. But I mean, in a sense, you know, that if you think about that particular period of the late 60s, when all of us sort of burst onto the scene together, it was a period of tremendous upheaval. Of course, assassinations, the war, the Kent State killings, whatever it was, and every institution was up for grabs, up for reassessment, and every artist was doing the same thing, questioning the rules, questioning the conventions and traditions, looking for some way to find something that wasn't connected to the past, wasn't shop-worn, wasn't contaminated. And so I said that, you know, minimalism and pop were the two big issues at the moment. And the same things, reductiveness and belief in process and self-imposed limitations. These were the rules of the day. And I said we were all nurtured by the same primordial ooze. The composers, the dancers, the choreographers, the filmmakers, the writers, the poets, everybody. We're all influenced by the same thing, and we're all nurtured by the same primordial ooze. And then we kind of crawled ashore and went our separate ways. But it all came out of that same kind of rich stew of ideas that not only were painters trying to purge their work, I was trying to purge my work of de Kooning and abstract expressionism. I limited myself to one color, and Philip Glass limited himself to 6 notes, and so many things really came out of that sense of how you put yourself in the position to make some. You know, Richard Serra, he didn't want to use bronze or wax or wood or clay, or because you brought too much baggage with you to the studio. So how do you get rid of that? How do you get the other people out of your studio? How do I get all the people who influenced me out of there? And he did it by using materials that he could find on Canal Street instead of materials that you find in an art supply store. So there was this period of real reassessment and purging of. We didn't want now, as opposed to the prime modus operandi since about 1989 or 90 has been appropriation. We were antithetical to the notion of appropriation. We wanted to purge our work of every possible reference to any other artist you could possibly think of. You didn't want anybody in front of your work thinking about another artist's work, which is really very different from appropriating and sort of raiding the cultural icebox and picking from the past and putting it together in a new way. So that was really, I think, what the nature of that moment was really like.
Well, I think that was a great description of a lot of the important issues of that period. But I also think that some people at that time, some artists and thinkers, advocated a really Hegelian, let's say, radical approach to the world, in the sense that progress was always being made and the past was being cast off, must be cast off. And I don't really
We
feel
still
that's
believed
your
in progress,
case.
though, I think.
Sorry?
I thought we still did believe in progress. Not necessarily up, but movement, that you could keep from being stuck. You could move, and you could program change in a way. And I think that was it wasn't. I remember one artist I know. He was talking about his. Nobody believed in masterpieces. You were supposed to work in a serial way and just keep working. And every painting he made was his masterpiece. And I said he managed to make masterpiece a serial idea by having everyone turn out to be a masterpiece. But it was a belief in process, a belief that process would set you free. You could be prepared. You could be protected from the buffeting winds of change as styles come and styles go, and things are hot and then they're not, if you just set your trajectory, your own personal trajectory, and go wherever it leads you, and then you don't have to be influenced by the change in the weather in the art world.
Well, you've had a lot of very memorable quotes through the years. We don't have time for me to even just say all of them. But one of them was that I painted more de Koonings than de Kooning. Yeah. And another one was when you...
When I met him, I said it was really nice to meet somebody who'd made a few more de Koonings than I had.
Okay, sorry. But I was in the ballpark.
Yeah.
But another one, on a more serious note, is in the book that you did with John Guare that deals with when you had this event, as you called it, that led to being paralyzed partially. And you were, in the book, it's an amazing, fascinating book if you haven't read it and seen it, because there's a visual component, it's very powerful too. But one of the things you talked about was having these visions that you likened to Anselm Kiefer rooms or Albert Speer architecture, these kind of long passages, and then you started to think, well, maybe I should sign up for some religion, and then you thought twice, and you said, any religion that would have me at this point isn't worth belonging to.
Right. Yeah.
And I was wondering, that's always just stayed with me as sort of a model, but I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit, because I think this must come up in the film, about that period in your life and how you really overcame that and got to paint again.
I was jealous of the people in the beds around me who had personal faith. It seemed to sustain them so much, and it seemed to make them feel so much better. And you can't fake that shit. You can't pretend to have it if you don't. You can't make yourself have it if it seems ludicrous, and it always seemed ludicrous. So, but I think that's I had tremendous support of my family and friends, and that I was blessed with. See, even blessed is like a religious term. I was lucky enough to have a positive personality. There's a lot of blame the victim stuff in the hospital too, in rehabilitation. If you don't get better, it's because you have the wrong attitude. And it just doesn't work that way. I watched people with the worst attitude who didn't do anything, who just lay around and whine and wouldn't do physical therapy and stuff. They'd get better and they'd walk out of the joint. And someone else who was busting their butt and really worked really hard and was staying positive, whatever, they never got better at all. And they rolled them out of there on a stretcher, exactly the same condition they came into the place. But, so you really don't know what hand you're going to be dealt. And the interesting thing about that is that you can take a losing hand, and by bluffing, if you play poker, you bluff and you will have a lot of guts and whatever, you can take that losing hand and you can make it a winning hand. Someone else can be dealt a winning hand and find a way to lose. And I think that that's pretty much the way I was lucky enough to have be glasses half full. And that just made my life and my life in the hospital a lot easier. It didn't, and I shouldn't get any credit for being by nature positive. And at the same time, someone should not be blamed for being by nature pessimistic and not optimistic, and because they're doing the best they can. That's all they can do. They aren't wired to do anything else. I was wired to do what I do, and they were wired to not be able to do much. And it's just sort of the way it is. I don't think there's much you can do about it.
How about emotionally when you started painting again, your first painting?
Well, it was interesting as I was down in this really depressing art. What do they call it when you have art in the hospital? Art therapy room, with half-finished baskets and stuff hanging from the ceiling. They actually had handicapped people wood burning. Was that a good idea? I mean, come on. What are these people thinking? But anyhow, I'm down there. I'm working on the first time I tried to paint. I had this piece of cardboard in a vise and drew a grid on it, and my assistant would mix some paint and put it in the brush holder, and I sort of fell onto the thing, and I immediately broke down and started crying. And I said, "You see, I can't do it. Can't be done." And I'm getting all the sympathy I can possibly get. So I'm just tears are streaming. You see, I can't do it. And I was thinking at the same time, well, it's not that bad. I might be able to do something with this. So after I milked it for all it was worth, I just sort of, but my assistant, and I have no memory of this at all, my assistant came to help me. I'd say a little phthalo green, a little yellow, lemon yellow, a little white, whatever, a little more of this, whatever. And then he would load the brush up, and then I would sort of fall in the painting. My memory of it was totally positive. I thought, I'm just so celebratory. I'm so happy. I'm back to work. And he reminded me, and I don't remember this at all, that I cried every single day that I painted, every single day. But luckily, or unluckily, I suppose, in terms of understanding myself better, I don't remember any of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, as a follow-up to that, there's an important quote in the film from the late Kirk Varnado. And I'm curious about your reaction to it. I've heard it a few times, but for the audience's benefit, he sort of draws a bright line in your career and says, everything about the early portraits have this extreme minimalism, and they have a toughness, a rawness, and a grittiness. They seemed, I think, at the time, colossally dumb. It was an extremely rote task to paint this giant, seemingly inexpressive mugshot on this scale. There was something inexplicable. Why would one want to give over so much time to create this much raw information? And now when we look at the lush, brilliantly colored canvases of the later work, there is something incredibly released about this work. Having sucked what seemed to be all the life out of his art, this new art is the miraculous repetition of the promise of what 20th century art can deliver. I guess I'm curious about your reaction to that and the implied narrative, which also comes up. We can start very quickly.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure that I can get downtown.
Just to finish the question, that there's, Bryce Martin also suggests that there's a reinterpretation of your work coming down the road that draws this bright line. And I guess I'm curious about your reaction.
Well, Rob Storr did something when he did the retrospective at the Modern, which I really appreciated, because people are really invested in seeing a major change, a seismic change between my work prior to my going to the hospital and afterwards. And Rob took the last show I did before I went in the hospital and the first show I did after I got out of the hospital, and he mixed them together in one large room, essentially defying the viewer to determine which ones were done before and which ones were done after. And I don't think most people can tell. I I can't remember which ones were done before and which ones were done after. So to me, all of these things bracket periods of time in your life. And artists don't, we think of what we do as a continuum. Every time you have a show, it brackets a chunk of work and sets it apart. But it's not that. It's all part of this ongoing dialogue you have with the art world and the viewer. And I guess I just resist very, very hard the notion that I think the work did become brighter and a little more celebratory, perhaps after I got out of the hospital, because I was just so damn happy to be back to work. But anyhow, I really like to have you have this much discussion before you've actually. You don't have to know anything about something to talk about it, right?
No, that's true. It's just talk.
Yeah. But anyhow, I just thought to say one thing about Marion, who worked on this film, I think 12 years or something. I had hair at the beginning of this movie. There was enough film to make 3 or 4 more movies. And the last time I saw it, it was 3.5 hours, so I don't know what got cut out. But the thing that I loved most about the film, and I loved about working with Marion, was that she was as interested as I was as this not being just about me, but that this be the threads of the art world woven together, the fabric of the art world that's made out of my relationship with all these other people that I painted, and other friends of mine, and my family, and that it's a portrait, I think, more of the art world of that, or at least my chunk of the art world that matters to me. And thinking about being in the hospital, it was the other family besides my real family, was the way the art world turned out for me and came to the hospital and visited me and rooted me on and cheered me up and was pulling for me. So it celebrates not only, in my mind, not only my work, but this complex, series of relationships. Okay?
Well, thank you so very much.
Okay.
Thank you for your time. This film premieres December 26th at the Film Forum.